I'm Vicki Stevenson, and I'm representing Exploring How Sources, Behaviour and Mitigation Strategies Influence Indoor Air Qualities as a pilot study. There are 9 of us in the group, all from different institutions, and our mentor for this is Professor Ali Lewis. Next slide, please. So we're going to focus on our aim. I'll go to the objectives a little bit more later on, which is to build up interdisciplinary monitoring and modelling capabilities to inform and influence building design and behaviour change. And in order to do this, we've formed ourselves into 3 work packages. The first one being behaviour, the second one being ventilation, and the third one being monitoring and CFD. Next slide, please. So focusing in on that first work package on occupant behaviour, we are focusing in on 3 main activities which we think are representative in most households, and that's cooking, dishwashing and cleaning activities. And we're analysing what we're going to do with those in relation to the UK time use survey. Next slide, please. So when we're looking at how we were going to proceed, our early findings indicated there wasn't actually a framework in existence. So we've been developing this, and that's what we're going to test in our pilot study. So I've already mentioned the activities, and we've looked at those in detail based on the UK time use survey for both the time that they happen and their duration. And we've included the confounding factors, which is weekday versus weekend. Obviously, behaviour tends to change a bit at the weekends, and also allowing for household size. And we've come up with the plan, which is outlined on the table on the right-hand side. So we start with an activity, which is, in this case, making breakfast. And most people don't have much time for breakfast, so it's only 16 minutes. So it's going to be something quite simple, like making toast. Then we're going to leave the room vacant for a while, just so that we've got a chance for kind of the space to reset. And that's what we're going to do for each of our activities. There'll be a chance for the room to basically be cleared out and reset. But that just means naturally. So our next activity will be washing up. Then we'll be cleaning the dwelling. Then around about lunchtime, there'll be a different cooking exercise. We get 2 whole extra minutes for lunch compared to breakfast. So that'll be something, again, quite simple, like pasta with a pre-made sauce. Then they'll be washing up. In the evening, we've got up to the startling allowance of 23 minutes for cooking. And we're looking at doing something like a stir fry there to create different types of emissions. And again, there'll be a sort of vacant period before we go on to washing up. Now, our real focus here is reproducibility. We've only got a very short project, so we can't do lots and lots of different experiments. So what we're going to focus on is basically a sensitivity analysis and making sure that what we do is reproducible. So before our actual experiment time, the recipes will be tested to make sure we've got something that's going to give us quite repeatable emission factors, and are cleaning the dwelling where there's a bit of flexibility in that. So we're going to have each of our individual cleaning activities like vacuuming, mopping, dusting, surface cleaning. Each of those will be timed again so we can be reproducible. Next slide, please. So look at our next work package, which is ventilation. And this is where we're actually focusing on the investigation, which is going to take place in the domestic facility at Chester University. Our first stage in this is going to be understanding the actual facility, what its infiltration and ventilation capabilities are. So in terms of infiltration, they'll be doing pulse testing, so that's basically its air tightness. And we'll also be looking at mapping the leakage so we know where we're having transfer of indoor and outdoor air through the building. And we'll also be carrying out an airflow and velocity study using a 3-dimensional anemometer. When we start looking at the ventilation, as we mentioned, we want to be focusing on repeatability. So we're going to do a sensitivity analysis between no active ventilation in the space and maximum extraction using the cooker extractor. Next slide, please. If we now move on to work package 3, we've got our monitoring and CFD. I think you'll agree we've got quite an impressive array of equipment planned to analyse our space. Most of this is already available at University of Chester, with a couple of exceptions which partner organisations are going to be taking there for specific studies. Next slide, please. In terms of the CFD aspect, and I'm assuming, sorry, I should have said computational fluid dynamics. We're using open access software called SAQN, so that means anything that we develop during this will be usable for people after the project. The mesh construction is already underway, and we've got scenarios for the CFD planned around our physical experiments. So that'll include basic airflows with a heat source, dispersion of a CO2 tracer gas, spatial distribution of particulates, and then an investigation for either no ventilation and with a full extract. On top of this, Stefano has also organised CFD training, which is running today and tomorrow. And where we can, the partner organisations have taken advantage of this by having people go on that training. Next slide, please. So just to come to our sort of full experimental plan, we're doing our best to basically protect ourselves from COVID itself and the regulations around it. So we've separated out the experiments. That reduces the number of people mingling in the space, and it also allows for different individual experiments to happen at different times to allow for different travel rules across regions. They are loosely described in before experiment and after. So before will be the investigation to analyse the actual space. So that includes the air tightness testing and the three-dimensional air flow testing, the leakage mapping, and calibrating the sensors. And we're hoping those will be completed by May, allowing the experiment to take place at some point in May or June. We're going to have 1 day for setup, then we'll have a typical day with no ventilation, repeated twice, and the typical day for high ventilation, repeated twice. And then after that will come the analysis of the bioaerosol samples which were collected during that period. And sort of running through all of this would be the CFD simulations which are being developed. Next slide, please. So what we've got so far and where we're going with this technically, this is when we start looking at the individual objectives. So for 1 and 2, which is quantification of the spatial temporal distribution of the chemical and biological pollutants with different activities and ventilation conditions. And for 2, which is evaluation of the low-cost environmental diagnostics to assess and manage indoor environmental quality, we have the experiments planned and the bulk of the equipment is available at domestic. For number 3, which is about the improvement of numerical simulations, the mesh construction is started and the experiments for that will be tying in with the physical experiments which are planned. Next slide, please. Objective 4 is about the development of a larger funding bid, bringing together different aspects of indoor air. And we are keeping an eye on the possibilities so far. A couple of things have arisen, but nothing which we felt met the sort of funding benefit requirements or deadlines that were appropriate. So we're watching out for more opportunities. In terms of number 5, collaborative publication, we have a report on occupant behaviour, which is nearly complete. And we've also pulled together a collaborative report framework, which we can all contribute to. And we've already got a lot of information there for literature review and the initial methodology. And we have routes to take those to open access. And the last one, inform and influence building design and awareness of behaviour change potential. We took our first step with this by contributing to one of the SAQN blogs in January, and we're looking forward to making more progress in that during the project. Next slide, please. In terms of management, the full project team has had monthly meetings in January, February and March, and the same for the work package teams. The overall contract was signed on 1st of February, but we're still proceeding with the collaborative agreement and we've got some little worries about that's maybe going to slow us up if we don't get it completed soon. We also have the research ethics application for the actual experiment going through on the 21st of April. Next slide, please. And we've got our Gantt chart. It's always good to see green on a Gantt chart, isn't it? So we've got some progress already completed, a lot of things in progress, which is yellow. And there's a couple of other things that should be in yellow, and that's my oversight. I do apologise. I will get that updated. So next slide. Which is just to say, on behalf of all the team, thank you for listening, and we look forward to your contributions in the breakout room. Thanks very much for that.